So we've moved now, Fraser, from the mezzanine level down to the ground floor level where many of the boarding gates are and the boarding takes place. A lot happening here. I should also note, as you did to me, that we're now in the 10th anniversary year for Terminal 2, so some refreshments needed, and we're seeing a reasonable amount of that happening right now, or beginning to happen right now. So maybe just take us through what newness is going to look like in 2024 for Terminal 2 first, and we'll talk about the other terminals after that.
Of course, and you're absolutely right, well remembered. So 2014 is when this terminal opened, so it is getting on for 10 years old when we get to June. So starting with refreshing, let's refresh in the refreshment category of food and beverage. So above us, we're taking out, or we have taken out already, as we saw, a big food and beverage unit operated by the restaurant group, and that's going to change into another exciting new brand for the airport run by them called Jones the Grocer. So that's important to do. And in the F&B context, we'll see in a second as we wander around some new stuff at this level as well. But more generally, when we go back to pre-pandemic, and I use that not because I'm obsessed with pre-pandemic, but it's pre-VAT.
Yeah.
And pre-VAT, at Heathrow, we were doing in 2019, or we did 23 refits and refurbishments in a year. So that's quite a scale of activity. Last year, in 2023, we did 36. So almost 50% more. And the plan this year, and those plans, as you know, always change, so we can't be exact, but I would expect us to be doing in the order of 30 to 35 again this year. Okay. So ferocious activity on the part of our team. You can see bits of hoarding behind us, and we'll see that as we go around. Ferocious activity and investment on behalf of the brands and the retailers as well. So it's important for me to say we really value, and I personally really value the confidence and the investment that's coming from those brands and those retailers, particularly in an environment where we know it's not as lucrative for those brands and retailers because of the tax thing that we said. But it's great to refresh it. And actually it's more important now that we refresh it because we don't have that same price lever. We need to be great on service. The execution in store needs to be great. The fit out needs to be great. So the brands and the retailers need to work even more hard, or even harder rather, and therefore getting those fit outs right is great. But it means the intensity of activity is greater. And there's a wee challenge for us around making sure then that we're as quick as we can on those refits, because of course a shop shut is a shop that's not earning revenue, and equally for passengers it's an experience that they're missing. Nobody wants to go past a piece of hoarding from a service point of view either, so it's really important that we get that. So if we're looking, just in front of us, this opened back in August. This is the Glenmorangie store with run by Avolta, obviously the Moët and Hennessy brand. It's our second standalone single brand whisky store. We've got the McCallum store, which has been very successful in Terminal 5, so that's great. Looking around to my right hand side then, we've got some hoarding up here now already. So we've closed down our Caviar House seafood bar, very successful brand that we've worked with for a while, but we wanted to kind of take the concept on a bit. So working with the SSP group, we're going to be opening a new wine bar area and everything called the Vinery in the next few weeks, so that's exciting. Brings a bit of refresh to this big area. And just while we're here, actually, one thing we've talked about before, you and I, is the experiential bit and the role that JC Decaux play in what I refer to as the quaternity, taking Martin's Trinity onto the next level. And you can see the Rabanne advertising there from the Pouge group continuing to be incredibly successful. That's one of our most successful experiential sites. And this year, within those 30 changes that we would anticipate, 30 to 35, 12 of them, Dermot, will be some of those experientials. Okay. And that's quite a challenge, but I see it as a trend where consumers are looking for freshness, and the challenge that we've got as airport operators working in that quaternity, so with the brand, with the retailer, and indeed with ourselves, is to say, and JC Decaux is to say, we need to do things faster. So the turn rate of these units, you can't just put something in and pay it back over 2 years now. You've got to pay it back over 12 weeks. So we got to be a bit more innovative about what we build, how we build it. And again, back to my intensity point, how intense we then trade it when it is open.
Yeah, so you're taking those a lot more spaces then that are going to be purely experiential, but talking short-term leases, trying new things, I suppose, is also part of the
absolutely.
trial and error.
And you know, I always say to the team, we'll do trial and error, and if it's error, the only person that gets fired is me. And I've managed to avoid that so far. We'll see how it goes in 2024, but absolutely trial and error is so important in it. And you can see that idea of experiential in domestic shopping malls as well. You know, if you go into a domestic shopping mall or indeed a domestic high street, you can see the placemaking and the idea that people are wanting newness, freshness, something different.
Yep.
Now, as we walk here on our left-hand side, what we see is a large amount of hoarding. This is our single biggest site, which is currently in construction. I was going to be coy and say, you know, something maybe luxurious is coming, but the LVMH group have told us exactly what's coming. So we're very excited to welcome. We've got a long-standing relationship with the LVMH group and with Louis Vuitton as their most successful brand, and they're coming to T2. That'll be sometime in Q2. It's a new concept for them, and I thank them for their confidence in us, particularly, as I say, in that backdrop of the challenge of VAT. But what I will say, we touched on it before, is sadly, although we're excited to welcome them, we're not welcoming them as an airport on the terms that I would like to see. And that's a reflection of the fact that despite a great job I know they will do, both in building it, operating it, and delivering a great service, the fact that it is VAT paid means that they won't be able to sell as much as they otherwise would, which means they can't afford to pay me as much as I would like as well. So the lights are going to be on, but that economic activity will not be as great as it could be.
Yes, and I guess it's interesting the conversations you're having with brands such as Louis Vuitton, many others as well, that they're still prepared under those terms and conditions where perhaps the trading environment isn't what it could be and maybe should be from your point of view, but they're still prepared to come to Heathrow, and it's still an attractive location for many of those fashion brands who, you know, even under those circumstances, want to be here.
And what I think I would say is, you know, we're not complacent about that. I think I would add they're prepared to come at the moment. And I think we've got to be incredibly careful. And I say this to my team, but particularly I say it to the British government, you know, because we are managing, and it's great credit to my team and to those brands who can continue to invest in this uncertain environment, but it is not a guarantee and it's not given. Yeah. So we need to be very careful. At the moment, they're still coming. As I say, not on the same terms, so it is not all fine. There is something to see, and there's something to see, yes, as activity, but there's something to see is also a lack of sales. And therefore it's still a fundamental problem for us. So what I said before about VAT absolutely stands, it's consistent. But you are right, they are at the moment still coming. Why are they doing that? Well, when we speak to them, firstly, London is still a great global city and they want to showcase their brand in London. Heathrow is the UK's hub airport, so linked to that, London and UK, they want to be here. Yep. And we've still, despite this terminal being 10 years old, we've still created a fantastic environment which they can put their brand and they can be proud of the adjacencies and what they're seeing around us. So, you know, we've worked hard to achieve that over the 78-year now this year history of Heathrow, and we'll continue to work hard to do it. But you're absolutely right, we can't guarantee it for the future, because in that environment where we're not as tax competitive as other major jurisdictions, there might come a point where these brands say it's just not working for us.
And some have, you know, if we keep walking, I guess
yes,
we'll see some examples perhaps around the
Indeed, so
concourse
if we look across here, so we've done a major refurbishment in this area of the terminal in Terminal 2. Most of it was delivered just ahead of the summer peak, and we finished it off in the autumn. And directly in front of us is one example where we have removed 2 retail stores. So we had Kate Spade and we had Smyson, the iconic British leather goods. I've got my little Smyson notebook in my pocket, and those would have been here. And what we've done now, working as I said before with SSP and the Starbucks brand, is created an elevated Starbucks, It's a very beautiful, and it does two things. One is it's a recognition that we need more food and beverage capacity, as I've talked about a little bit. Secondly, we actually need to generate footfall into this area. The ceiling's not quite finished above us, but it's quite a light and bright area. But actually, it's a little bit of a cul-de-sac, and we needed to draw more passengers in. So having an elevated food and beverage unit like this one from SSP, really important to play that role. And then what we've done is, despite losing the 2 retail offers, which, as I say, is a factor of that VAT thing, we've managed to welcome Kurt Geiger back again. They've refreshed their offer. Hugo Boss, a very popular, very well recognised, particularly in Europe, a kind of upper high street brand. We've welcomed them back into a refreshed store. And we continue our long-standing relationship with the iconic British designer Paul Smith. And we're really happy to see them back in T2 in their same space, but in a beautifully refreshed store. And if we look around to my right now, again, another member of the LVMH family. The family have got a few spots in Terminal 2 now. This used to be a fine watch room.
Yes.
So it was multi-brand watches, and actually working with, we went out to tender, and Tiffany, as part of LVMH Group, have built in their latest store design, I think, a stunning Tiffany store, great digital. I've often talked about our 4 retail pillars. You've heard me banging on about digital, experience, space and offer. This is a fabulous space. They've used digital. The team inside deliver a great experience, and it is a great offer. It's the Tiffany jewellery is iconic. VAT is still a topic. We wouldn't be in the luxury area if I wasn't talking about VAT, but nonetheless, having a very strong brand like Tiffany is great. And as we sweep around here, more change. So this is a new Bottega, Burberry and Bottega Veneta store. Burberry was further along. That used to be Bulgari. Bottega Veneta's refitted out in here. And then our Gucci store remains iconic part of the Kering family. And then the final bit here in terms of newness is when we moved Burberry out of their larger store, we've been able to welcome another member of the LVMH family, and that's Dior. So Dior are opening literally, Dermot, in the next few days. And we're really pleased to have them. We've got them in Terminal 5 as well. Passengers really, really like it. The Dior brand is growing incredibly well within the LVMH family, and it's great to have them here. So on the one hand, in that little walk round, you might say, well, Fraser, it's all okay. You know, you've got great luxury brands, and we have. You've got great new fit outs, and we have. But the reality is the team are having to work really hard to do that. And secondly, as I say, unfortunately, the trading levels are not at the level that we saw pre the change in the VAT policy. So that comment I made about the tourist tax and the lights being on and the economic activity being reduced is sadly correct. But I'm really proud of what the team have done in managing to continue to attract these brands. As you and I said, we can't guarantee that will always be the case. But it's great to see it. And for passengers, as you can see, looking back now on what we've just walked, although there's that hoarding there and that deorbit will come down, you can see the sweep that we've just done. It does deliver a great passenger experience, which is what we're all about at Heathrow, trying to deliver the best airport service in the world. And we only do that if we can offer the best airport retail in the world.
And interesting, we spoke about Starbucks taking some space from what was previously boutique space. Do you see that as a trend, perhaps? Something that will happen a bit more, just given that food and beverage is so central to service overall at the airport, and you're very conscious, I know, of the change in the mezzanine level here in T2, and in terms of how that might impact service in terms of people being able to get through and have a meal. Where do you see space being taken or moved to, given the constraints that you have on space at the moment across categories?
So I think. So what we will see is not, I wouldn't say it as revolutionary change. There is a small evolution in the space mix. So you're absolutely correct. You will see a little bit more food and beverage. And that example from Starbucks is a good one. later in the year I'll be able to take you to Terminal 5 and show you another small change, but it's on the margin changes, Dermot. It's not wholesale, but it is absolutely on the margin. Food and beverage space will grow a little bit, and that's a recognition of the demand for F&B is strong. You know, on the back of the recovery of passengers, what we've seen at Heathrow, and I think other airports have seen it, is a slight increase in dwell time. And we're seeing a dwell time increase probably in the order of 10 or 12% in terms of time in the departure lounge. Naturally, as human beings, the longer you're somewhere increases the propensity for you and I to need to eat, and it's the same for our passengers. So that's one driver of there being a little bit more demand. The other driver of demand is our passenger, a reason for travel has changed slightly, and that's stuck after the pandemic. So we're seeing slightly more people traveling to visit friends and family than we're traveling for business.
Yeah.
And that means that those travelers traveling to visit friends and family are less likely to be traveling in front of a plane, less likely perhaps to have airline status that allows them access to a lounge. So that's another reason from a demand point of view why there might be more people wanting to eat in the main concourse. I chose my words very carefully there because people read that as a change in demographic, and it's not. Just because I'm traveling to see my mother or I'm traveling to see a relative doesn't mean that demographically I'm any better or any worse than if I was traveling on business. But it does create a heightened demand for food and beverage. So across the terminals, we're forensically looking at, do we have enough space? We always start from a space planning point of view to say at Heathrow, and other airports will do the same. What do we need from a peak point of view? How do we make sure we've got enough food and beverage capacity? Then how do we make sure we've got enough essentials retail, the likes of Smith's, Boots and things? How do we get the duty free correct? And then the specials retail comes after. And we plan, as we have done before the pandemic and before the VAT change, we plan that same way. And we can see the need to just insert a little bit more on the margin of food and beverage, so we're doing that.
And we've spoken and walked T2 in terms of change and newness. What about the other terminals in terms of what's coming down the track in 24 across not just F&B but retail and other services? So
across the track, as I said earlier, you know, the intensity overall is higher, so that would be the first thing to say. So you will see, and our passengers will benefit from more change in 24 as a run rate than we would have seen, as I say, before the pandemic, and at the same run rates we did last year. And I think that's a structural change for us. And so I think the kind of travel retail ecosystem, airports, retailers, brands, media owners need to recognize now that consumers, I think we probably, you know, both have kids, their attention span is probably a lot less than we would want. Consumers are a bit more fickle. And we need to recognize as part of the travel retail ecosystem that we need to be more agile, more flexible. And therefore fit out timescales are going to just turn faster. And we've seen that already. So as I said, I would expect us to be doing 30 to 35 changes this year. Some of the highlights of that, in T3, we've already taken back some space from the iconic luxury retailer Harrods. That was one of the examples of that VAT position. We agreed very amicably with the Harrods team that, you know, in the new VAT paid environment, they were just not going to be as productive as they would want or as we would want. And we have a long-standing, over 30-year relationship with the Harrods team. They're great retailers, great at what they do. I'm very, very proud of the relationship, and they do a great job in their main store in Knightsbridge as well. I was in there on the weekend. It's a very, very good store. But it's not working as much as we want, so we've taken space back from them. Their gifting business runs very well. It's less impacted because of the lower price point on VAT. So we've retained the Harrods brand, so you can still pick up your iconic Harrods branded bags, the smaller value gifting food items. It's working incredibly well. But we've taken back space and we've created two new, roughly 100 metre square iconic boutiques. And I can tell you that two international luxury brands will go in there. Can't tell you who they are today. That will become obvious in the next few months. We're still in the contract negotiations. But that's another positive example that the brands are still willing to engage. But as I said, as we walk past the Louis Vuitton hoarding, we can't guarantee that and we can't assume that, so we need to keep working. So that's one example. A lot of the other changes, Dermot, will be driven by that security program that I talked about. So Terminal 4 will see quite a lot of change, and we don't actually know yet the exact shape of that. So a little bit of wait and see. But there's lots and lots and lots, and the volume will be really high. So going back to that Paco Rabanne underneath the flight information screens to over your shoulder there, you know, we'll see more and more of those experientials, particularly on things like the alcohol categories and the beauty categories, the kind of core duty-free almost that we can now see behind us as we've got to the main duty-free store. And we'll see lots more of that as well.